Alright, so while the car was off getting painted, one of the things we worked on was some of the sub-assemblies for the car. So stuff like the front subframe, the rear beam for the Fiesta, to get those ready to go back on now that it's back. So on the front subframe is a few little things that we worked on. Some of the suspension mounting points, like the captive nuts in the subframe, weld those a little bit more thoroughly because you're going to be taking stuff on and off the car a lot. You don't want those to break free while you're trying to work on it. So where the bolts go through, get a little, like a washer welded so that there's a little bit of extra thickness there where that bolt gets clamped down. We've also got our skid plate mounting points welded to the bottom of the subframe. So just a nice sturdy spots for the rear of that skid plate to mount. Other items that are different, there's some reinforcement here on this subframe. That's a new thing for the newest R2T specification. So anyone who's interested in Fiesta specifically, you don't necessarily need that. That hasn't been a huge weak point for us, but it is kind of a nice little upgrade to strengthen that area there. These bits also, where the subframe actually mounts to the shell, get welded. They come just with these 4 little dimples that kind of hold that sleeve in place, so those get welded solid, and then this actually gets drilled out, and that's going to accept a welding item on the shell that helps locate the subframe and strengthen that mounting point a little bit better. Other items on the subframe, so we've obviously got it built up with the sway bar and the steering rack. This is just a stock Fiesta steering rack. The only difference, cut this off so we can look at it, is underneath the boot here, we've got this extra big steering limiter. So what that's going to do is just limit how much steering angle you can get, which is going to save your CV joints a little bit. So that's one addition to that. Other changes, so this is a stock Fiesta front sway bar. With the new suspension that the car is going to get, this stock end link would end up someplace kind of up where the spring is. So you won't be able to use these, so we've got these shorter ones that go on. And that's actually just a fairly common sized sway bar end link that's been cut and re-welded to the right length. So if you had a car where you had suspension that you bolted on, but your sway bar end links or sway bar mounting points aren't in the right spot, you could do something similar. Just get a steel end link off of something else, cut it to the right length, and weld it back together. There's also some questions on the knuckle pins. So these are machined for this application. I'd probably say if you have a car and you want to do something like this and get rid of the stock bushings in the ball joint, if you can't find someone that's already making them for the car, I don't really know of any universal things like this where it is kind of application specific, but what you might do is take some measurements, go find your local machine shop and try and have them make something up for you. On the rear beam, couple changes. For the most part, the beam itself stays pretty stock bushing up front on this. That is one area where you could put a spherical bearing in there, but it doesn't gain you a whole lot of performance as far as handling and stuff goes, but you might end up bending the beam more often, so we do leave that stock bushing there. The stock Fiesta has a 4-bolt hub, so what we've got here is an adapter bracket that's welded to the beam, and that does 2 things. It gives us our brake caliper mounting point to go to discs as opposed to the stock drums. So we've got in this case, a 2-piston radial mount caliper that's going to go right there like that, and also gives us a slightly bigger rear hub compared to the regular Fiesta, and it also changes how it mounts. So in the stock Fiesta, you've just got 4 bolts and it mounts flat surface to flat surface. On this, the back side of this hub sticks out and it goes into a hole in this. So now you're only relying on the bolts to clamp that hub in instead of relying on them for that in shear as well. Other couple small changes on the bottom. we've just got a small strengthening plate welded in there to beef this area up between the hub and the shock. And then these are really important. Those are our rear wheel scrapers, and what that's going to do is as your wheels rotate around, you'll find your rear wheels on a rally car can get quite packed full of mud, which can be an issue both for caliper life and wheel life, where rocks and stuff can get caught, and as that wheel's turning it'll wear them down, and you could actually wear completely through the caliper or completely through the wheel, and end up losing brake fluid or having a flat tire. So these just sit really close to the inside edge of that wheel, and they'll scrape the mud out as it goes around. And it's just a steel bracket that's bolted here and bolted here with a little piece of rubber just to give it a slightly more forgiving surface where it's actually right up against the wheel. Yeah, so these are at this point pretty much ready to go. They'll get bolted on the car, and then the last few things will get assembled, the control arms onto the subframe and stuff like that. Spending a little bit of time now working on the wiring for the car before we actually get to assembling it, because this will be one of the first items that gets installed. So in the Fiesta, what we do for an R2 Fiesta is reuse most of the stock wiring loom, and then we've also got an overlay loom that goes in as well. So for the R2, it's using standalone ECU and stuff like that, so you don't need some of the stock items, but by using that stock harness, you cut down a lot of work as opposed to making a fully custom harness and stuff like that. But this overlay loom gets us some of our additional functions that we need in a rally car. So where you lose the horn button and stuff like that in the steering wheel, we've got a button for a horn. We've got our auxiliary driving light power switches. We're getting rid of the ignition switch, so we've got a start button and an ignition switch there. And then this is also our master switch, which a couple different ways you can do that, but that's our sort of main power kill for the battery. So we're using here, basically just a really big heavy duty relay controlled by that switch. The other way you can go is just to get one of the big battery switches and mount that somewhere where you can reach it easily while you're seated. So what we're doing to the stock harness is a lot of it will look something like this when you pull it out of the car, and so when it's installed with a full interior and everything, it's usually covered up with carpet and other trim pieces, so there's not much risk of it getting damaged. Once we've got it stripped down as a rally car, you're gonna have issues if you leave it like this and all the wiring is exposed, and you start getting issues with abrasion and stuff like that. So we've got some kind of braided sleeving that we're gonna put over all the wiring. There's a lot of plastic stuff that would mount the wiring in the car, stuff like this, that we're gonna take off and throw away, and then we'll add zip tie mounting points in the car once we install it. And then there's also some minor changes where we're having to slightly reconfigure stuff to make it work with the rest of the R2 electronics. Some changes with the fuel pump, with the standalone. This Fiesta comes with a module that controls the fuel pump that won't recognize that ECU, so there's some changes there. Some of that stuff on the auxiliary harness there needs to get tied into the wiring, so things like the horn, that button needs to get tied to the stock wiring to make the stock horn work. The auxiliary lights you're tying into the stock wiring, so you can use your high beam switch to turn those on and off. So there's some stuff like that where we're tying into the wiring, and then also adding some additional things just for this specific car. So like we're gonna have a power point for cameras and stuff like that in the car, some dome lights, nice to have some lighting in the car at night, some additional stuff on top of what the R2 harness comes with will get added in, and some of it's separate, some of it will tie into the stock harness. But that's kind of where we are with that.